On the 12th of November, bombs whizzed through the hospital courtyard and crashed into wards. Doctors tried to help patients even as they ran for cover. Thousands of war-wounded medical staff and displaced civilians are sheltering at the moment at Gaza's largest hospital, Al-Shifa. With the Israeli soldiers and Hamas militants locked in close-quarter combat just outside the facility, the scenes from inside the hospital are gruesome and saddening to the core. Incubators lie idle with no electricity. Critical supplies are running out, and innocent newborns are dying.
The catastrophic situation in Al-Shifa Medical Complex is getting worse, and everything that moves inside the hospital's corridors is being targeted, and it is not possible to enter or leave the hospital. There is no safe corridor in Al-Shifa Medical Hospital.
There is another private obstetric hospital was targeted directly today, and two of our colleagues who are specialists in obstetric and gynecology were killed tonight. There is no service for pediatric patients in the northern area. 5 kids in the pediatric ICU left alone in Rantisa Hospital, and we don't know what's going on with them. The communication were lost, so they might be dead or alive.
The Israeli military has denied that it launched direct strikes or placed Al-Shifa under siege. In fact, Israeli claims that it was helping babies and others evacuate are rejected outright by Palestinian health officials and people trapped inside Gaza's Al-Shifa. So, who's behind making the hospital a death trap? The Israeli military claims that Hamas has established command posts in and underneath hospitals and is using civilians as human shields.
This is a covert tunnel. It's part of the same floor and it slides down here.
It has released a video showing what it said was a children's hospital that its forces captured. The video showed weapons found inside the hospital and rooms in the basement where it believes the militants kept some of the hostages they abducted on the 7th of October. The White House said its own intelligence has confirmed that Hamas was using Gaza's Al-Shifa hospital to run military operations and probably to store weapons, saying those actions constituted a war crime. These allegations are denied by Hamas and hospital staff. On the other hand, Palestinians and rights groups accuse Israel of recklessly harming civilians seeking shelter. In this Hamas-Israel war, as Israeli tanks crunch through the hollowed-out heart of Gaza City, hospitals in the main combat zone of Northern Gaza have increasingly ended up becoming flashpoints for the warring narratives. Look at this video shared by an eyewitness. At Gaza's Indonesian hospital, medical staff were seen treating a patient's head wound using a torchlight from a mobile phone amid power cuts. The dreadful battles around Shifa and other hospitals raise an urgent question. Why are hospitals getting in the crosshairs in Gaza? Do medical facilities have special protection under international humanitarian law?
We all agree that humanitarian pauses would advance key objectives. to protect Palestinian civilians.
As the war enters the sixth week, Israel has come under mounting international pressure, even from its closest ally, the United States. But Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is refusing to budge. He has pushed back against growing international calls for a ceasefire, saying Israel's battle to crush Gaza's ruling Hamas militants will continue with full force.
לא תהיה הפסקת אש בלי שחרור חטופינו. כל השאר
There will be no ceasefire without the release of our hostages. Anything else is futile. There is a tiny handful of people who do not represent this public, who take the law into their own hands. We are not prepared to tolerate it. We are not about to accept it, and we will act against it in every way. This causes serious international damage to the state of Israel, and it does not represent the public.
וציבור המתיישבים ביהודה ושומרון.
Previously, Israeli forces said that they had cut Gaza into two parts, north and south. On the 14th of November, the United Nations said another 200,000 people had fled the north towards the south in the past 10 days. United Nations-run shelters in the south are severely overcrowded, with barely one toilet for 160 people. In all, some 1.5 million Palestinians, over 2/3 of Gaza's population, fled their homes. Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh has called on the United Nations and the European Union for help. He has accused Israel of perpetuating the occupation of Gaza.
I appeal to the United Nations and the European Union to parachute aid into Gaza, especially in the north, as has been done many times around the world. We call for the opening of aid corridors in Gaza, not limited to the Rafah crossing. I say to the Israeli Prime Minister, who opposes the return of authority to Gaza and wants to maintain the occupation for a long time, that his policy will bring misfortune to them. Gaza is a part of Palestine, which has been occupied since 1967, and we do not need anyone's permission to help our people there.
Both Israelis and Palestinians want the same land, and a compromise between them has proven difficult for decades. What then is the dispute over the Gaza Strip? Who controls it? Let's delve into the roots of the Israel-Palestine conflict. The Gaza Strip, a small piece of land on the eastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea, has been a focal point of conflict and tensions for years. This narrow strip of territory measures 365 square kilometers. It is home to nearly 2 million people, making it one of the most densely populated areas in the world. The Gaza Strip is in the eastern part of the Mediterranean basin, bordering Egypt to the southwest and Israel to the north and east. To the west, it is flanked by the Mediterranean Sea, providing its inhabitants with access to valuable coastline. Its geographical location has played a significant role in shaping its history, putting it at the crossroads for various civilizations throughout the ages. The population of the Gaza Strip is predominantly Palestinian. Israel's armed forces have encircled Gaza City, the largest city in the Gaza Strip, in their assault on Hamas. The city in the north of the Gaza Strip has become the focus of the military campaign by Israel, which has vowed to annihilate the Palestinian Islamist militant group's command structure. Israel is the world's only Jewish state, located just east of the Mediterranean Sea. Palestinians refer to the territory as Palestine and want to establish a state by that name on all or part of the same land. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is over who gets what land and how it's controlled. Though both Jews and Arab Muslims date their claims to the land back to a couple of thousand years, the current political conflict began in the early 20th century. Jews fleeing persecution in Europe wanted to establish a national homeland in what was then an Arab and Muslim majority territory in the Ottoman and later British Empire. The Arabs resisted, calling the land as rightfully theirs. An early United Nations plan to give each group part of the land failed, and Israel and the surrounding Arab nations fought several wars over the territory. Today's dispute reflects the outcomes of two of these wars, one waged in 1948 and the other in 1967. Historically, a part of the Palestine region, the area was controlled by the Ottoman Empire for almost 400 years.
The resolution adopted by the General Assembly of the United Nations.
But after the First World War, the League of Nations granted quasi-colonial authority over former Ottoman territories to Great Britain and France. Gaza became part of the British Mandate of Palestine and remained under colonial rule until 1948. The British colonial rule came to an end by May 15, 1948. As soon as the British Mandate of Palestine was repealed, violence intensified between Jews and Arabs, culminating in a war between the newly created State of Israel and its Arab neighbors. During the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, tens of thousands of Palestinian refugees went to the Gaza Strip. In the wake of the 1948-49 war, Egypt occupied Gaza for almost 2 decades. By the end of the war, 25% of the mandatory Palestine's Arab population was in Gaza, though it constituted only 1% of the land of the region. In terms of numbers, the influx of refugees saw Gaza's population triple to around 200,000. Egypt held the Gaza Strip for 2 decades under a military governor, allowing Palestinians to work and study in Egypt. And then, in 1967, another war broke out, the Six-Day War. Fought between Israel and a coalition of Arab states, namely Egypt, Syria and Jordan, the Six-Day War resulted in over 20,000 Arab casualties, while Israel suffered fewer than 1,000 casualties. The war lasted less than a week, from the 5th of June to the 10th of June 1967. This resulted in Israel seizing Syria's Golan Heights, the Jordanian-annexed West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, as well as the Egyptian-occupied Gaza Strip. Israel occupied Gaza in the 1967 war and stayed until 2005. During that time, many Jewish settlements were made. This became a prime reason for the growing resentment of Palestinians over the next decades. In 2005, Israel unilaterally withdrew its troops and settlers from the Gaza Strip. The policy called disengagement was designed to remove Israel from direct management of the Palestinian populated territory. However, it retained control over its airspace, shared border and shoreline. The UN still considers the territory to be occupied by Israel. Soon after the withdrawal, Israel and Egypt imposed a blockade for security reasons. A year later, Hamas won the elections in Gaza, defeating Fatah, the main Palestinian party that still controls the West Bank. But in 2007, following tensions with the official Palestinian leadership, the militant Hamas faction took control of the Strip by force. Since then, Hamas has evolved from a relatively small movement into a well-funded conglomerate. Over the years, one of the ways Hamas operated and thrived has been through this. It has built a tunnel city stretching beneath Gaza for hundreds of kilometers, up to 80 meters deep in some parts. A hostage who was held in the network before being freed by Hamas described it as a spider's web. The Israeli military says many of the Hamas tunnels, command centers and rocket launchers lie adjacent to schools, hospitals and humanitarian institutions in northern Gaza, including the region's largest hospital, Al-Shifa, in Gaza City. But now, with Israel claiming to have acquired total control of the northern part, the big question is, who will control the region in the coming days?
The October 7th massacre proved with finality that any place that didn't have Israeli security control would see terror return and establish itself, and eventually strike us. That has been proven in the West Bank too. Therefore, I won't agree to forgo security control in any scenario.
Netanyahu has made it clear that security control will remain with Israel in the future, but that could have several challenges for Israel. Experts suggest that eliminating the underground spiderweb of tunnels could present its army far greater challenges. But more than the warfare, the humanitarian crisis is a greater cost that Israel will have to contend with. Ever since the start of the war, Israeli attacks have devastated more than 41,000 housing units and damaged more than 222,000 housing units. That is at least 45% of Gaza's housing units, totally damaged or destroyed. Who will construct them? The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs said 279 educational facilities had reportedly been damaged, more than 51% of the total, with none of Gaza's 625,000 students able to access education. What will happen with these children? Around 390,000 jobs have been lost since the start of the war. The socio-economic situation of Gaza was already dire before the war, with the poverty rate estimated to have reached 61% in 2020. By a preliminary estimate, the UN agencies said poverty was expected to rise by between 20% and 45%, depending on the duration of the war. Will Israel build what has been destroyed?
I can tell you what there won't be. There won't be Hamas. And there won't be a civilian authority that educates their children to hate Israel, to kill Israelis, to wipe out the state of Israel. There can't be an authority that pays the families of murderers based on the number of people they murdered. There can't be an authority headed by someone who over 30 days after the massacre has yet to condemn the terrible massacre. It's not possible. There will have to be something else there. But either way, there will have to be our security control.
אבל בכל מקרה חייבת להיות שליטה ביטחונית שלנו.
And now the displaced and trapped Palestinians have to face another challenge. The start of the rainy season has piled on even more despair, as many find themselves homeless or living in makeshift tents, with the prospect of flooding causing apprehension about the spread of disease.
Winter is a nightmare. The situation we are facing now will be a nightmare. In the past, I used to wish for winter to arrive and for the rain to fall, for the trees to start to bloom and grow so that we can harvest. But right now, I pray every day for it not to rain. We're living in tents, nothing that protects us. When the rain falls, we will drown.
Overwhelmed by the daunting scale of the humanitarian needs of Gaza's 2.3 million people, aid organizations have so far been unable to plan for the challenges created by rain and flooding.
On average, a child is killed every 10 minutes in Gaza.
One child is killed on average every 10 minutes in the Gaza Strip. This is what World Health Organization Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said at the United Nations Security Council. Time is running out for these children of war. Time is running out for Gazans trapped in northern parts. Time is running out for those stuck in hospitals. And time is running out for world leaders to stop the war. Over the past few days, more than 100,000 residents have fled to the south. The growing number of evacuees from northern Gaza has caused a shortage of accommodation and supplies in the southern part. With not enough global aid, each day is a soul-sapping struggle to get bread and water while waiting in lines. As Gazans await the war to end, they prepare themselves for a bigger battle. The battle for survival.